Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Green. We're doing another Bible study, Matthew chapter 27. If you'd like me to come speak at your church, or if you have any questions, you can send me an email or you could just comment below. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, click the notification bell so that way whenever I post a new video, you'll get updated. Like the video and also comment. Even if your comment is something simple as thank you, thumbs up, hi, smiley face, it really helps me out with the algorithm. And here we go. Matthew 27 and verse 1. When the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate the governor. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. Psalm 73 says, Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. Verily I have cleansed my heart in vain and washed my hands in innocency. For all the days long have I been plagued and chastised every morning. For if I say I will speak thus, behold, I should offend against the generations of the children. When I thought to know this, I was too painful for me, until I went to the sanctuary of God. Then I understood either end. Surely thou dost see them in the slippery places. They casted it down to destruction. How are they brought to desolation? In a moment, they are utterly consumed with terrors. A lot of times people they'll try to get stuff for their own personal gain, whether it be riches, some type of celebrity status, some type of value. And they don't realize what they're sacrificing to get to that point. And sometime when they finally realize that, they realize that they cast themselves into destruction and they're consumed with the terrors. It's probably what's going to happen next. Matthew 27:3. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? See thou to it. The interesting thing about this is Judas felt guilty for what he did by betraying Jesus. And I guess in some way he thought, maybe if I return the gold, that'll make me look like a better person, maybe. I don't really know. But the chief priests were like, we don't care what you did. We don't care that you feel bad about it. What's that to us? You go do what you got to do. And then he cast down the pieces of silver to the temple and departed and went and hung himself. And the chief priest took the silver pieces and said, It is not lawful for them to be put in the treasury because of the price of the blood. And they took counsel and brought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Wherefore that field was called the field of blood unto this day. When it was fulfilled that he was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And they took their 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom the children of Israel did value, and gave them for a potter's field, as the Lord appointed me. You see, it was prophesied way before that all these things that happened to Jesus was going to happen. And this was actually spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, talked again in Zacharias, it talked about this again. Jesus is going to be betrayed by his people for the price of a common slave. And Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And Jesus said unto him, Thou wast sayest. And when they accused the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. They asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he's like, Well, you said it. That's kind of what his answer was. And said to Pilate with him, Hearest thou not how many things they witnessed against thee? And he answered him never a word. And so as much the governor marveled greatly. Now at the feast the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner whom they would. And they had a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, Whom will you release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? You have to understand that every now and then, I think it was once a year, the governor was able to give away one prisoner, give them his inauguration. He can basically free somebody. And he said, surely if we put up Barabbas and Jesus, they're going to pick Barabbas to go to jail because Barabbas was a horrible person. He stole, he killed, he fought, he beat people. He was just a really horrible person, and nobody wants somebody like him on the street. So surely they're going to pick Barabbas over Jesus. And they said we want Jesus to be the one imprisoned and release Barabbas. For he knew that the envy they had delivered him. And he was set down on the judgment seat. His wife sent to him, saying, Have thou nothing to do with that just man? For I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. Pontius Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent. And he knew that the chief priests and the scribes and the elders were going after Jesus because they were jealous of him. He had more fame than them. He spoke up against them, and they wanted to do this for their own personal gain. And even his wife said, I've had dreams about this man. Please don't do anything bad to him. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said unto them, Whether of the twain will ye release unto you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said unto them, What should I do with this Jesus which is called Christ? And they all said unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, What? Why, what evil has he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. Pontius Pilate was shocked. He's like, surely they're going to say Jesus can be freed over Barabbas. But they picked Barabbas to be free. And he's like, well, okay, but what are we going to do with this Jesus guy? And they said, crucify him. And Pontius Pilate's like, why would we want to do that? Because he hasn't done anything wrong. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water, and he washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See you to it. He washed his hands. He's like, this person is innocent. This person did nothing wrong. I'm not the person going to be responsible for this. Then he answered all the people and said, His blood be upon us and upon our children. Then released he Barabbas to them. And when he had scourged Jesus and delivered him to be crucified, the Jewish people said, We want him crucified. The blood's on us and our children. They chose that. But Pontius Pilate did everything he possibly could to let Jesus be free. And they still said they wanted him to be crucified. You know, if you go over to Luke 23, it kind of talks about the same idea. It says, And Pilate said unto him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, That thou sayest so. So Pilate and the chief priests and the people said, I find no fault in this man. And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirred up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. And when Pilate heard that he was from Galilee, he asked whether the man was a Galilean, because he wanted to make sure that he was in the right district. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was also at Jerusalem at the time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he was desirous to see him in a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracles done by him. Pilate finally thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and put them on Herod, because it's in Herod's jurisdiction. And Herod's like, I'm excited to meet Jesus. I'm excited to see this guy. I've heard many things about him. I've heard he does miracles. I really want to go see him. And then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod with his men of war said to him not, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. But Herod said, I can't find any fault with this guy, so he's basically saying, I'm going to send him back. And then the same day, Pilate and Herod were made friends together, so before they were an enemy between themselves. And Pilate, when he called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, he said unto them, You have brought this man unto me, as one that pervexes the people. And behold, I have examined him before you. I have found no fault in this man, touching those things which you accuse of him. No, nor yet Herod, for I say unto you, lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. Pilate saying, I didn't find anything wrong with him, and Herod didn't find anything wrong with him. There's nothing worthy of crucifying him. So I'm just going to basically give him a really strong talking to and maybe beat him a little bit, and then I'm going to release him. Back to Matthew 27:27. When the soldiers of the governor took Jesus to the common hall and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers, they stripped him and put him in a scarlet robe. And when they had plaited a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit upon him and took the reed and smote him on the head. If you go look at John 19, it says, When the chief priests, therefore, and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. And the Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law we ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that his saying, he was more afraid, and went again to the judgment hall, and said it unto Jesus, Whence art they? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then said Pilate to him, Seekest thou not unto me? Knowest that I have the power to crucify thee, and I have the power to release thee. And Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except that were given from thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto their hand is greater sin. He's saying, listen, Jesus, just say you're innocent and I can let you go, because I can crucify you or I can let you go. And Jesus said, it's not for you to decide. My Father in heaven, he's the one that's actually gonna decide this for you. And the person that delivered me unto you, the Jews, they have the greater sin. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down on the judgment seat in a place was called the pavement, and the Hebrew Gabbatha. Matthew 27:31. And after that they mocked him. They took a robe off of him. They put him in his own raiment on him and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by the name, and he compelled him to bear his cross. And when they come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, the place of the skull, they gave him vinegar to drink, mingled with gall. And when he had tasted it, therefore he could not drink. If you're really thirsty, would you want to drink some basically vinegar and some urine and stuff like that? You wouldn't want to drink that. So they're basically mocking him some more by doing this. When they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garment among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. See, Jesus was put on the cross here, and I'm sure you've seen this type of a picture before. Your hands were basically crucified to the cross, your feet were crucified. But if you look at the picture, you can see that the nails are put into his actual hand. But the word for hand is basically anything from the fingertip to the elbow. And I'm going to show a couple pictures here, so if you're kind of squeamish, just skip through real quick, of where they actually would crucify him. You see, when they crucified somebody, all the weight would get pulled down on the body, and a lot of times it would dislocate the shoulders. They would actually put the nail in between their wrists, and there's a reason why for that. You see, if they put it in the hand, it would actually rip clean. All those bones there in your hand would just break apart, and it would just go right through your fingertips. So what they would do is they put it in between these two bones. You can see these two bones in this picture here. And this little red square was where they'd put the nail at. It would be between two bones. They've actually done scientific studies on this, where if you put it in the wrist area, your weight could actually be held by your wrist. But if you put it in your hand just slip right out, and the nail comes out through your fingers. Also with the feet, they'd put it in the foot in a certain way that would hit almost every single nerve and would cause a great deal of pain. But see, Christ died for our righteousness. Christ died for us. This says here in Romans 5, For when we were yet strength, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcity for a righteous man for one die, yet peradventure a good man some will even dare to die. But God commanded his love toward us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than being now justified by his blood, we should be saved by wrath through him. Revelations 1 says, And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, and laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. For he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive evermore. Amen. I have the keys of hell and of death. 1 Corinthians 6 says what? Know ye that your body is a temple of the Holy Ghost, which are you have of God, and you are not your own. You are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which is God's. Back to Matthew 27:35. And they crucified him, and they parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled that it was spoken by the prophet. And they parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down, they washed him there. And they set over his head his accusation, written, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. And there were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and one on the left. So you can imagine this picture. You have Jesus in the middle with this little accusation on top. They usually put an accusation like this person stole, this person beat somebody, this person, killed somebody, whatever. But on top of Jesus' throne, it said, This is the King of Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And he had two thieves on either side of him. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. For if thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. They're mocking Jesus more, saying, your sign says you're the son, King of the Jews, and you think that you're the Son of God. If you really are the Son of God, why don't you save yourself? Likewise also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders, saying, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross and we'll believe him. And he trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. And it says here, the thieves also which were crucified with him cast a lot in his teeth. Cast the same in his teeth. It says the thieves, so both of them, the one on the right and the one on the left, both was making fun of him up until a certain point. If you look over here in Luke 23, and this is one of the malefactors which were hanging railed on him, saying, if thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the other answered, rebuking him, saying, does that now fear God, seeking thou the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing amiss. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, verily I say unto thee, today you shall be with me in paradise. Now I really want to quickly say that the two thieves were making fun of him in the beginning. And then one just goes, you know what, we deserve this. We did bad things. We deserve to be crucified. But Jesus here, he's innocent. And so he asked God to forgive him. He asked Jesus to forgive him. And Jesus said, today you're going to be with me in paradise. It's really important. He said paradise. Now, the reason why I say it's important that he mentioned paradise, and this is why. If you look at Luke 16, it says, it came to pass that a beggar died and was carried to the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and he was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and seeing Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy upon me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receiveth thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he's comforted, and thou art tormented. And besides all this, between us is a great gulf fixed, so that they would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass from us that would come from thence. You see, there was this great divide. On one side you had Hades or hell, the other side you had paradise or Abraham's bosom. And there was this great gulf in between, so people couldn't cross back and forth. This is where the thief's going to go. And it actually says later in the Bible that when Jesus died, he came down to paradise and he set the captives captive. See, from Adam to Jesus, the blood of animals covered their sins. They were saved on credit, but they could not go to heaven, so they went to paradise. See, Psalms 32 says, blessed is he that transgression is forgiven, whose sins are covered. Psalms 85, thou hast forgiven the iniquity of thy people, thou hast covered all their sins. Selah. Isaiah 61, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord, my soul shall be joyful in my God, for he has clothed me with the garment of salvation, he has covered me with a robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decketh himself with ornaments, and a bride adorneth herself with jewels. 1 Peter 3, for Christ also has come to suffer sins, just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, but being to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, which whom he also went and preached to spirits in prison. Ephesians 4, but unto every one of us to give his grace according to the measure of the gifts of Christ. Wherefore he said, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive, and he gave gifts unto men. And now that he ascended, what is it that he has also descended first to the lower parts of the earth? It's saying here that Jesus, when he died, he went down into the paradise and he set the captives captive. He set captivity captive. He freed the people that were saved on credit and took them to heaven. You see, since Jesus shed his blood, our sins are cleansed, and we go straight to heaven. Second Chronicles 5, we know that we are an earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved. We have a building of God and a house not made by hands, eternal in heavens. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon which our house which is up in heaven. So it be that clothed we shall not be found naked. For we that are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened, not for what we will be unclothed, but clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up in life. Now that he has wrought us from the same self thing as God, also has given us the earnest of the Spirit. Therefore we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord, For we walk in faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and willingly rather to be absent from the body, is to be present with the Lord. Now, once you die, you go straight to heaven. John 20. And when he saw thus, he said, and turned herself back, and Jesus standing and knew not it was Jesus. And Jesus said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou, whom thou seekest? And she, supposing him to be a gardener, said unto him, Sir, if thou be born of him hence, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said unto her, Mary. And she turned herself and said unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. And Jesus said unto her, Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I have ascended to my Father and your Father, as your God and your God. He's saying, I've not quite ascended yet, so you can't touch me. You're not able to touch me because I haven't ascended yet. Luke 24, different story. It says they spoke Jesus and stood in the midst of them and said to them, Peace be among you. And they were terrified and frightened, and supposing they had seen a spirit. And he said unto them, Why are you troubled, and why does that arise your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Handle me and see. For a spirit has no flesh and bones, as you see me have. You see, once you're ascended, once you go from your earthly body to your heavenly body, then you can be touched, but not in the meantime. 1 Corinthians 15. As we have borne the image on the earthly, so shall we also bear the image in the heavenly. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound. The dead shall be raised incorruptible, and shall be changed. For this corruptible must be put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So we get changed when we go from our earthly body to our heavenly body. Back to Matthew 27:25. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land till the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? You see, Jesus took all of our sins upon him, and God cannot look upon sin. That's why he's saying, you forsake me. You're not giving me attention anymore, because God can't look upon sin, and Jesus became sin for us. Matthew 27:47. Some of them that stood there, when they heard him say that, they said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. You can imagine a guy getting a big spear and putting a sponge on it and dipping it in vinegar and try to drink it. You're not going to want to drink vinegar when you're thirsty. And the rest said, Let us see whether Elias will come to save him. And Jesus had cried again with a loud voice, and he yielded up the ghost, basically meaning he died. Back in Luke 23, it says, And when they come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand, the other on the left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. John 19 says, When they crucified him, the two with him, the other side of Jesus in the midst, and Pilate wrote a title and put on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. In this title they read many of the Jews, for the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh to the city, and it was written in Hebrew, and Greek, and Latin. And then the chief priests of the Jews to Pilate, Write not King of the Jews, but that he said, I am the King of the Jews. And Pilate said, What I have written, I have written. And then the soldiers, when they crucified Jesus, they took his garments, and they made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam, it was woven from the top throughout. And they said therefore among themselves, Let us not rent it, but cast lots for it, whom shall it be? And the scripture may be fulfilled, though said, They parted the raiment among them, for my vesture they did cast lots. These things therefore the soldiers did. Now there stood by the cross of his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciples standing by whom he loved, he said unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. And he said to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. Now it's interesting, people always think that Mary was a perpetual virgin. But if you look at Mark 6, it says, Is thou not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, and Joseph, and of Judah, and Simon? And these are not his sisters with us. or they were offended by him. You see, after Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph and Mary and her other husband, they had other kids. So Mary was not a perpetual virgin. Matthew 27:51. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. The fact that the veil broke from the top to the bottom is a miracle in and of itself. You see, back in the temple, you had an area that the priest could hang out. Then you had this great big huge curtain divider. It was huge, and I'll tell you how big it was here in a second. And that was the separation point between the Holy of Holies and the rest of the tabernacle. And once a year, a priest got to go in there and offer sacrifices. But this was a giant divider. It says here, no one but God could have done such a thing, because the veil was 60 feet tall and 4 inches thick. In the direction of the cherubim, God destroyed the barrier between himself and humanity, and only an active God has the authority to do that. You see, before that, once a year, a high priest was chosen to go into the holies of holies and make a sacrifice. When this happened, the curtain was ripped from the top to the bottom, 60 feet high, 4 inches thick, from the top to the bottom. Signified now, you don't need a priest to go to God for you. You could just pray and go to God yourself. Matthew 27:52. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went to the holy city and appeared to many. So dead people are coming out of the grave. They're going into the city. Many people saw this. Now when the centurion and that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake, and those things which were done, they feared greatly, saying, truly this was the Son of God. And many women were there beholding afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him. And among which was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James, and Josie, and the mother of Zebedee's children. When the event was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea, named Joseph, who himself was Jesus' disciple. And he went to Pilate, and he begged for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. Mark 15 says, and Pilate marveled that he was already dead, and calling into the centurion and asked him whether he had been basically dead for a while. And when he knew it, the centurion, he gave the body of Joseph. Matthew 27:60. And he laid it on his own new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. And the next day, the fall of the day of the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together to Pilate. And they said, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said when he was yet alive that after 3 days he's going to rise again. They were like, we're so worried that he's going to rise. I know what we're going to do. It says, command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest the disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, he has risen from the dead, so the last heir shall be worse than the first. They're saying, this guy keeps saying he's the Son of God, and he said that in 3 days he's going to rise again. We need to put somebody in front of this tomb. We need to have some guards there to make sure that the disciples don't come and take him. Because if they come and take him and say that he was risen, we're going to have an even bigger problem on our hands. And Pilate said unto them, you have a watch, go your way, make it as sure as you can. So they went and they made the sepulchre sure, sealed the stone and set in a watch. Now you have to understand how these grave sites were done. You had a spot in the rock where you could lay your body, and you had this giant rock. This giant rock was made so it would take multiple guys to move it. And what they would do is they'd put a nail in the front of that rock, and then when they remove that nail, the rock would, through gravity, roll down in front of the door, and so nobody could get to it without having a couple different guys. And what the Romans would do is they said, we need to secure it. So they would take that same nail hole after it was moved, and they put the nail back in there, and they'd use molten metal to make sure it was not going to go anywhere. You can actually see this guy right here pointing at the spot. See, there's an iron spike in the wall. That iron spike is what let the rocks move. And then you can actually see the rock has been assured. They have molten metal on there to hold it in place. That way you can't pull that piece of metal out, and that way the rock can't be moved. Well, guys, that's the video. I appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, you can always let me know. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, like and comment. I'm going to put a couple links on the screen. The bottom right is going to be the Matthew Bible study. The top left is going to be the Luke Bible study. And the bottom left is going to be a video YouTube thinks you're going to like. If you know that somebody that might benefit from the study, please share it with them. You can also share it on social media. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have yourself a great day.